with us today.
Good afternoon, Assembly Member Cynthia. Thank you. Good afternoon, Assembly Member Cynthia Harding, Interim Director for LA County Department of Public Health. And as Supervisor Solis said so well in her testimony, LA County is extremely concerned about the ongoing impact of more than 3 decades of contamination from the Exide facility on the surrounding communities. While the focus of the hearing today is on the closure of the facility, we're extremely concerned about the contamination in the residential properties surrounding the facility. Supervisor Solis spoke about some of the health impacts, lead, and what lead does to children and to pregnant women, and we're extremely concerned about that. We're also concerned about cancer risk and other impacts from many years of past exposure to arsenic, benzene, other chemicals. And while exposure to those chemicals has been mitigated with the closure of the plant, the residents in that neighborhood are going to carry that increased elevated risk of developing cancer for the rest of their lives. Our county's perspective is that the progress has been too slow in assessing and cleaning up contaminated properties, and we want to see the Department of Toxic Substances Control accomplishing more rapid assessment and expedited cleanup of the most heavily contaminated residential properties. But this will require additional funding. You heard today that the amount that's allocated for 16-17 will cover 1,500 homes, and as Supervisor Solis said, there are 10,000 properties that need to be assessed. That has to happen first so that we can then determine which are the most contaminated properties. We estimate that'll be about around 1,000 properties, and that's critical. I'd like to respond briefly to the 3 questions you posed to Los Angeles County. And you asked us about LA County's role in the residential cleanup in communities surrounding the Exide facility. And as Supervisor Solis said, we do not have regulatory authority, but under the authority of the health officer, the county is working with the state to ensure the protection of public health and that it's considered throughout the residential property assessment and cleanup process. To date, we've done outreach to more than 800 homes to educate residents about how lead can affect their health, the pathways of lead exposure, how to protect their health, why these assessments of their properties need to be conducted, and risk reduction actions that they can take before their property is cleaned up. We've developed a rapid field assessment screening methodology, and as you heard Supervisor Solis through her leadership, the board has allocated $2 million so that we can do that rapid assessment in the screening and work alongside DTSC to make sure more properties are assessed quickly, and then we can determine which ones need cleanup first. We are working closely with DTSC on that. And your second question was to describe the financial commitment. You've heard from Supervisor Solis about the $2 million to support this effort. And in addition to our conducting rapid assessment in the field, we would focus on conducting outreach and education to schools, to local clinicians, to healthcare providers, and to residents in order to make sure that residents are connected with services, with medical care, that there's outreach to local clinicians so they know what to look for in screening, and to improve early detection and diagnosis and treatment. We can do increased screening for childhood asthma and access to medications, and increased screening and intervention for children with learning difficulties and behavioral conditions. And your third question was to describe how we are working with DTSC on the lead testing and coordinating to share data. And we've been on weekly project calls with Department of Toxic Substances Control. We've been sharing our methodology. We've been sharing also our fact sheets on lead that are in multiple languages so we can get this out to the community in languages that they speak. We have shared our documents with them. We're going to continue to coordinate with them. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, that we're working together to make sure as many properties get assessed as quickly as possible and that we get the cleanup done as quickly as possible. But we're going to need your support. We're going to need your support as we go into this budget process and request additional funding to get this done in the expedited manner so that we can protect the public's health. So I think that, as Supervisor Solis said, this community has been waiting for a long time. If we delay action, we risk further contamination, possible lead poisoning of children and adults, and we condemn this community to potential health and learning problems. They've waited too long. They deserve action now. And I'd also like to ask Angelo Bellomo to briefly talk about the issue of lead paint versus lead soil contamination and how LA County is briefly looking at this. This is a conversation we will continue to have with the Department of Toxic Substances, but I would like him to address that. He's the Deputy Director of Health Protection for our Public Health Department.
Thank you, members. Angelo Bellomo with the Public Health Department. Let me just mention that in almost every cleanup that the state will be involved in, there's always a question about whether there are multiple parties that may be responsible. And in this particular case, that can be made. I know that early on, Exide was making the point that, well, the lead isn't just due to us. There's lead from the freeway. There's lead from other industrial sources that are in the area. And there's also lead from lead paint on the homes. We really believe that the precedent that's been established historically in California is to define who is the primary responsible party and to go after them aggressively. If we had a situation here that didn't demand the urgency this one does, we could let the courts sort out who's responsible and what their apportionmented cost should be, but it would take years to take care of. So our view on this is that we should go after Exide, get the cleanup taken care of as quickly as possible, and then let the courts sort out in the future. It could take years. It may take a decade for the financial commitment and apportionment to take place. We can't wait in the interim. Lead paint is common throughout most of our urbanized areas throughout the country. We certainly have it throughout LA County and every other heavily urbanized area within the state of California, and we have ways of dealing with it, but the burden ultimately falls on the homeowner. We don't think that placing that burden on our homeowners in this community is an appropriate course of action. So we will continue to counsel our homeowners and our tenants, our residents of the area, on what they can do to mitigate the lead paint hazard, but we don't think that should be tied as a condition to moving forward to clean up this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our other two panelists.
Hi, my name is Terry Cano, and I'm a lifelong resident of Boyle Heights. And I'm here representing the health-affected residents of all the communities. My story is a little bit unique in the sense that we've had 4 generations that have lived in Boyle Heights. My grandmother first came to this property, or bought the first property in 1933. So that's 4 generations all exposed to the contamination. Unfortunately, I'm sorry because I'm so frustrated. I've lost both my parents to complications from the contamination from Exide. And my brother is also dying of cancer. He has months. And over the years, my health has deteriorated such that there's no guarantee how long I'll be. I'm 43. I've had strokes, a couple of strokes. My spine is deteriorating. We all have breathing problems. There's 5 children. My parents had 5 children. The 3 that moved away are healthy. My brother and I, who stood, and my children, who were both born premature, are all sick. That's not a coincidence. And the frustration and the anger that I feel is that we said something a long time ago, and we were all still alive, and because of the dragging of the feet and and pointing and all this, my parents are gone. No matter how quickly this, and I hope it's done quickly, the cleanup is done quickly, it's never going to bring back my parents. As a result of this contamination, the new thing in our family is when one of us dies, we hold their hand and we tell them, from my hand to God's hand. That's a new tradition. We did that for my mom. We did that for my dad. And if you think how you could ever get over looking at your family members struggle and suffer for breath, and the fear and the look in their eyes because they're literally suffocating in front of you, that you will never, ever be able to clean up. Had this been done, had this never happened, had DTSE and AQMD never failed us, I would never have to do that. I'm a single mother and a homeowner. My brother and I are who my kids have left, and we both have a death sentence. Who is going to continue that tradition and hold my children's hand when they die, because they are already showing effects from the contamination? I beg you, and I'll beg anybody, on my knees if I have to get the money to get this cleaned up now. It makes no sense to me why they would, DTSC, if you look at priorities, would choose to spend millions of dollars to clean up the site. Nobody lives there. The community live in their homes. It's the equivalent of responding to a house fire and there's a family about to die by fire in the house, and the fire department's watering the lawn to contain the fire so it doesn't spread instead of saving the family. That's what's happening here. My family's gone. It's just me and my brother. He was the last one to carry the family name, and he can't any longer. I want you guys to think of my children, who are extremely close to me because I'm all they have left, and tell me who's going to be there for my son's graduation, because I seriously doubt that I will. Who's going to be there when he gets married? Who's going to be there for my daughter? They're going to be alone, and I don't ever want to see anybody go through what we're going through. Nobody should have a tradition, a death tradition in their family. But now, thanks to Exide and the dragging of the feet of DTSC and their failures, and they're supposed to protect the community, and yet, while we're dying, they're drafting a plan on how to close a facility where no one lives. It's ridiculous. I'm begging you to please allocate any money, do what you can to save the rest of the community, because my family's gone. But at least save the rest of the families that do live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
My name is Mark Lopez, and I'm a resident of East LA, the impacted area. I'm also a member and executive director of East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. I wanted to make sure to acknowledge especially the youth in the audience who are here today from East LA and Southeast LA, who are really understanding this issue, and I think are here to make sure that they're not dealing with this issue the rest of their life, to make sure that subsequent generations of their families, of our families, aren't dealing with this issue. You know, the powerful words that Terry just shared with you, I really hope you feel it, and that guides your actions moving forward in holding Exide and these agencies accountable, in securing funds for cleanup, because this is the reality on the ground. Just yesterday, one of our members, longtime member, that we affectionately call Nico, her house was tested in the city of Commerce, and they found priority 2 levels on her property. This is a home that was her mother's home, it's her home, her children's home, and her grandchildren's home. Her daughter just had a baby a few days ago, and this is the property that she was raised on, that she has lived on during her pregnancy. And when they gave her results, they told her, maybe we'll clean it up in a year. They said, maybe we'll clean it up in a year. There's no question about the impact. We're having confirmed results of lead poison in the ground where these kids are playing. Right? This is the center of a family. This is where cousins, aunts, and uncles all come to gather, all come to celebrate birthdays and baby showers, all come to do what kids do, all come to do what our families do: grow food, put our hands in the soil, play with the soil. Right? This is the reality of what's happening on the ground. And when we find out our land is contaminated, what do you think that does to us, for those of us that are parents? Those of us who have allowed our kids to play in this dirt. And those of us that have allowed our kids to play in this poison because we didn't know any better. Because the state, which was supposed to protect us, didn't. Right? Think about the responsibility we feel and the way we feel we failed our kids. Right? And so we're asking you to take responsibility. The state needs to take responsibility. We need the $70 million now that the supervisor is requesting. And of course, before that $70 million run out, we need the governor to identify funds to continue sampling and cleanup until this is all dealt with. That's what we need now. We need you all here to make sure that the governor does that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and for your input. I want to thank our Secretary and now Supervisor Hilda Solis for coming here and having meetings up here in Sacramento to further, and we look forward to working with you and having continued conversations after today. Our job is not to have a hearing and go away. We like following through and doing all the work that's needed to get the answers as soon as possible. When they talk about doing 1,500 in 1 year, we know that's going to take 7 years at that pace, right? To test 10,000 homes, we need to move faster and move this process much more expeditiously because that's what our families deserve. So thank you all, and look forward to working together again in the future. We're going to invite the next part of this panel to come up, which is they could walk up to this table. And for this discussion, I'd like this panel to use up to 20 minutes to walk us through what the proposed closure plans are for ultimately closing the facility. We know that this is a gargantuan and incredibly technical and complex process, and there's some differences of opinion. Without getting too technical, if this panel could please give us the nuts and bolts of the plan to close the facility, walk us through how the plan, once it's approved, will be implemented and funded. And we're not going to pick sides here on which proposals are better, but to understand the process and propose solutions for the closure of this facility, we'd like to ask the Exide representatives to walk us through the major points in their proposed plan, the greatest challenges to closure from the company's perspective, and how the company foresees implementing and funding the plan. Then I'd like for DTSC to speak next to share with us their perspective on the draft closure plan, describe to us the process for implementation once it's approved, and certainly don't shy away from telling the committee about the most complicated, perhaps controversial aspects of the plan and what DTSC proposed solutions are. And lastly, we'd like to hear from the South Coast Air Quality Management District about their role in overseeing the facility's closure.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Gene Urban. I represent Exide. Sitting from your right is Randy Visser, lawyer, Tom Strang, our principal witness, and John Hogarth, who ran and runs the plant in Vernon. We're here. We will answer the questions you ask, and we'll make a brief presentation.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, I'm pleased to be here to participate in your informational hearing today. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety for the Exide Americas. Exide has been in business for 120 years and is a leader in automotive and industrial battery production and recycling of spent batteries. Exide acquired the Vernon facility in the 2000. The site has a long history of industrial use dating back to 1922. There were several owners prior to Exide, and it's been in use since 1922. The current facility was rebuilt in 1980, and that's the facility that we're talking about bringing through closure. The Vernon facility is surrounded by numerous industrial sites, numerous highways and arterial roads, and one of the world's largest consolidated rail yards. It's the start of the Intercontinental Railroad. Under Exide's ownership and its 130 employees, the Vernon Recycling Facility recycled approximately 25,000 automobile batteries a day, or about 8 million batteries a year. Primary oversight from the regulatory agencies was from DTSC, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board. Operations of the Vernon facility are now closed. It will not reopen, and we're taking it through the closure process. In March of 2014, we shut the facility down to perform maintenance work and install additional engineering pieces of equipment to meet future air quality standards that were going to be imposed in California over the next coming years. In March of 2015, there were several factors that caused Exide to withdraw its permit application, and we decided to permanently close the facility. Over the course of 2014 and 2015, Exide was going through a lot of things to emerge from bankruptcy, and part of that we entered into orders that were issued by DTSC. Those obligations include posting $38.6 million for the closure of the facility and $14 million for residential cleanup. That $14 million was in two trust funds. The first was $9 million posted right away, and then $5 million to be posted in future years. With that $9 million, we were directed to clean up the homes in the northern and southern assessment areas, which were first tested, and that included 186 properties we cleaned up at a cost of $50,000 per home. The expectations were we would clean up a minimum of 10 homes per month. We hired 2 contractors to do the work so we could go even faster. And at one point, we cleaned up 24 homes per month. So we accelerated that cleanup, and we accelerated the expenditure of that $9 million as quickly as possible in that community. You couldn't have put more people at work in the tight roads and conditions we were in. It was about all the contractors you could put to work at any one time. Exide has met all of its obligations of those 2 orders with DTSC. At each point in time when money was to be posted, we posted the money, and we continue to meet those obligations going forward. In addition, Exide has also funded, for the past year and a half, the blood lead testing program administered by the California Department of Public Health at a cost of $864,000 over that period of time. We're not sure what the results of that blood lead testing is. We've not seen any of those results from the testing. We certainly would like to see those, as I think that the public would like to see those results. We've also paid for DTSC oversight costs over the past year and a half. It accounted for about $2.4 million to pay for that oversight. We've paid for third-party monitoring of our maintenance activities over the past year and a half in readying the site for closure. And that cost to AQMD. AQMD hired a third party, and we pay for that third party to watch the mitigation plans that we implement as we're doing maintenance work on the site. And that cost was $1,400,000. Finally, we've engaged engineers and other experts to develop the closure plan. It took us several months to put that together. And under the oversight of DTSC, Exide has submitted a closure plan, which is out currently for public comment. It was issued first part of December, and that period is still going on to end as early here in February. The closure plan will take place in three major phases. The first phase is the above ground work, where we actually, first of all, have to remove all of the waste from the material from the facility. We have to remove all the lead that's in the kettles. Then we have to disassemble the buildings and take it down to grade. Now, probably the most challenging piece of this whole closure plan will be how we get that lead out of the kettles. I think there's been a little misunderstanding about what it entails to reheat those kettles. It's not a matter of restarting the factory. It's a matter of turning on some gas heaters that are used to heat the kettle. We did a lot of analysis to try and find out what the safest and most environmentally responsible way to remove that lead was. We talked to others in the lead industry. We talked to contractors who potentially could do other types of work. The three areas we looked at were using a water cutting technique, which is pretty experimental at this point. Cutting lead is very difficult because it's a malleable metal. That would take a very long time and would create a lot of environmental problems with all the water that you would have to control and treat on site, and it had a lot of risky aspects for the employees doing it. The second method would be to go in and actually try and use a chisel or a backhoe with a pick to try and pick the lead out. And again, the risk involved with putting someone inside the kettle and being exposed to chipping lead and the lead dust that would be generated as you chip it are just too extreme to put a person in the kettle doing it in that fashion. And again, we've talked with a lot of experts and other smelters around the country, and the approach that everyone recommends is to refire the kettles themselves, reheat the lead. And we're not reheating it to the point where you're actually going to have any emission. I liken it to heating some ice, an ice cube. You know, you've got a solid piece of water, and you heat that to the point where it melts, and now you have a liquid. And if you heat it further, then you'd have steam and vapor coming off. What we're talking about doing is heating the lead to a point where it's liquid, and we can pump it. And that's all the further that we'll heat it. We'll pump it out, and we put it into we cast it into blocks, and then that lead can be reused. So that's probably the biggest challenge of that first phase, is to make sure we get that part of it clearly understood by everybody and realize that can take place environmentally safe, has no risk to the community, as the environmental equipment will still be there. And it will also be permitted by South Coast. We'll have to go through a permitting process to make sure everything's safe, and so there will be regulatory agencies looking at that aspect of the closure. The second phase is the below ground work. Once we get the buildings leveled, then there will be some sampling that will be done, and that part of the plan will involve removal of contaminated soil up to 5 feet of soil, and may involve also a cap on the site, depending on what the samples show. And then finally, the third phase is the long-term maintenance of the facility, and typically a RCRA facility entails 30 years of ongoing maintenance and monitoring to make sure that the remedy that was put in place is functional and everything's working as planned. All of these activities are expected to cost $38.6 million, and that money has been set aside in the Closure Trust Fund. All of these activities will be monitored by DTSC, AQMD, and the third-party monitor that will be selected by AQMD to watch all the mitigation plans that we have for taking apart the various pieces of equipment. Activities will be done in compliance with all regulations. So, in conclusion, Exide has worked hard to meet its legal, its remedial, and financial obligations over the past several years getting through this closure piece. We fully intend to meet those requirements going forward, and we look forward to working with DTSC, AQMD, LA County, and other interested parties to make sure we complete this process in a professional, environmentally friendly manner, and we are very watchful of the community, that there will be no community impact from this closure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have some questions, but we're going to try to get through our panelists very quickly, and then we open it up for questions from members, which they do have.